morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you not only to 2024, but also to my YouTube channel, A Box With No Lid. A channel that I've dedicated to talking about everything that I've learned over many, many years being around, the implications of complex trauma and being an advocate and a therapist and a practitioner, but also the lived experience of what I've learned in trying to help myself find the answers that I needed to be able to improve my quality of life. Now, in today's video, I want to explore something that can get a little messy in the telling because it is so vast. And it is a word that is not really understood because it's uncomfortable for us to understand it, and that is the word of accountability. And it opens up Pandora's box of this whole nest of processes and thoughts and actions within ourselves. So, in exploring accountability, there are two types of accountabilities. The first is the most obvious. It's a direct consequence, the ripple effects of what you've said and done, the actions that you've taken, the things that you experience of what you have created. That's not the accountability that I want to explore in these next two videos. What I want to explore is inherited accountability, and to bring that into your vocabulary, because inherited accountability is so vast in our dysfunctionality of our society. And it is an excellent way of viewing and understanding generational trauma. It is also an excellent way of understanding how abuse environments are created, because it has become such a generational reality. Now, what do I mean by inherited accountability? Inherited accountability is the accountability that the consequences that you have to deal with that were not of your making. You had no say in the creation of them. That is, a very obvious and simple example is fetal alcohol syndrome. Quite a common part in the Western world. These poor kids and adults, they never drank, but they've inherited. You can look at it in regards to poverty, systemic poverty in our society and all the households and families in amongst it. The difficulties. You can look at the societal structures where certain races, creeds, and colours are judged because of their race, creed, and colour by governance and law enforcement, and they suffer as a result. You can look at it in the context of parental dysfunctionality due to relationship breakdown, due to socioeconomic standings, poverty, and so forth. Living in higher crime areas because of the cost of living, and all these things that our parents, grandparents, and so forth made and passed on to us. You can look at it to every child that is taken for adoption in however form. That's inherited accountability. I live the accountability of zero connection to a biological family that I've never been able to find, and all the implications of that, and the ecology that created so many of the other abuses of my childhood were a direct result of that. That's all inherited accountability, and it creates so much in our society, and it is such a hugely embedded issue that what does the Western world do? It ignores it. And the only problem with that is ignoring it is what created it in the first place. Now, the first trap with inherited accountability is blame. Even though we can blame, and we have every right to, and the logic and rationality behind it is completely correct. But blame solves nothing. Because those that are accountable won't accept it. And even if they did, they don't have the ability to resolve it because that opportunity is passed by them taking the actions that they took. or the series of actions, or, and as I said, when we're looking at this, the complexity around inherited accountability is we just pass it back generation to generation. The dysfunctionalities of Western families now is so vast, and there's so many reasons for it, that it becomes so huge that nobody wants to touch it. And because of that, we live en masse in our societies inherited accountabilities, where we're accountable for choices we had no say in. The perpetrational aspect that this creates, because of blame solves nothing, there is no solution. The only option is anger. And this is what creates that perpetrator, expansion, because the abused becomes the perpetrator. And I've seen that a lot in many different sectors of this. Not just when you're looking at child abuse in that regard, but in many facets. The aggression and dysfunctionality and violence we're seeing in our society with teenagers now is all down to inherited accountabilities. And our society's avoidance of accepting accountability and applying the necessary resources and resolve to healing it. And this is why this is such a challenging area to look into. And I'll probably have to do several videos around this. But I really, in this first video, want to introduce the understanding of what an inherited accountability is. Get that into your vocabulary. Because the most critical part of working with this, and it's a part that you kind of need to be prepared to admit to yourself before watching the part 2, is the willingness to admit to yourself that you need to change. Now, when we look at this huge list of areas, like I'm never going to be able to put the images up or the list of all the different areas of inherited accountabilities. But I do want to step out, what creates it. And this step out, as you can look at it, will go back generation to generation to generation to generation. And eventually, depending on how far down the rabbit hole you go, you'll find points where it started. And the difficulty with that is you cannot resolve it with those people because they've passed. Now we have, some of the things that have hugely impacted, particularly, global societies. The amount of men that died in World War One, never in human history have so many young men been removed from so many societies. Millions were removed in a few years. The ripple effect of that alters the complete societal structures of every society on the planet. Because women have to step in the roles that their roles have to change. Families have to change. Entire family lineages have been removed from communities because the men aren't there to have children. The men that came back completely broken, and the abuse harms that came from that, and all of this. This is what I mean by these ripple effects. When you're looking at indigenous communities through colonization, through boarding schools, residential schools, massacres, forced relocations, and the systemic abuse for generations, for centuries, created this inherited accountability that we see in all indigenous communities now. It is so vast. When you look at religious persecutions, the same deal. When you look at nations conquering other nations, the nations that are conquered, the poverty and everything that happens, we've got this huge mess of inherited accountabilities. And yes, it is completely vast. And yes, as a society we go, it's too big, it's too messy, let's not deal with it. But how does that help us when we're trying to live with it and heal? And that's why I made this video. because I've spent my entire life trying to find solutions to something that I cannot fix because I didn't create it. I've spoken with literally thousands of others over many, many years in the same boat, from indigenous to adoption to domestic violence to alcoholism to everything, veterans, the whole lot. And this is the thing. The only way we can start to work with this impossible mess is we ourselves have to admit that we need to take steps to change. And I want you guys to get to that point before watching part 2. And in part 2, I want to start to get into ways we can help to work with this. But please keep it in mind, the trap of blame. And take the time to take a few breaths and to really go, yes, I know I am right in my justifications of who I am and how I behave and what I do, but I need to change to benefit me, to support me and those that I care about. That's the space that I would love for you guys to be in before watching part 2. So please be kind, please be gentle with yourself. As always, I welcome emails, I welcome your questions. And I'll see you in part 2 shortly.